Okay, the next thing we're gonna talk about is compression. A compressor, basically what a compressor does is a compressor reduces the volume of a signal when it passes a certain threshold, and the signal gets reduced by a certain ratio, and the way the compressor acts is controlled by an attack and release time, because if the compressor reacts too fast, there can be distortions happening. So it's in many times good if you use a little bit shorter attack and release times so that it acts in a musical way. And there are 4 different types of compressors. There are VCA compressors, voltage controlled amplifier compressors. These compressors have very fast attack and release times. Then there are FET compressors, which are kind of a tube emulation, or they have some tube sound. Then there are optocompressors, which are a little bit slower in their reaction, so they have a little bit slower attack and release times, which make them very good for vocals. And there are also very mu compressors, which are perfectly for gluing things together. They have a variable ratio time, which means if you compress more, the ratio gets less. And I would advise you don't get too crazy with all the different compressor types. Simply choose 1 or 2 compressors. For the mixing stage, I think you don't need more than 2 compressors. For the mastering, you do need a lot of different compressors with different characteristics. But for the mixing, you can use just a few compressors and simply learn them, learn how they sound, and check them out, learn them really well so that you can use them pretty well and good. Okay, now I'm gonna show you some basic compressor. It's just for just that you see how it looks. Most of you guys probably know everything, but I just show it to you very fast. On many compressors you have RRC, which means automatic release control. If you activate it, the release is being controlled automatically. Simply try it out how it sounds. Then on this compressor you have an electro or opto switch. Opto means opto compressor, which means the behavior of the attack and release times are slower. Electro, I would say it's a VCA compressor, so it's faster. The attack and release times acts faster. I would use it, for example, on a bass line. I would use, I don't know, I would try it out, but probably electro would work. On a lead sound, I would maybe try the opto compressor. Personally, on a, for example, a bass line, I like if it sounds snappy, and if it sounds snappy, it needs tight attack and release times. Then we have a warm and smooth option. I think it's simply a different characteristic. Then we have a threshold. If a signal passes the threshold, it gets reduced by a ratio of 5:1 or 6:1. Now the question arises, when do I need to compress? First of all, if you ask yourself, when should I use compression? There are the following cases where you can use compression. First of all, you can use a compressor to make a signal which has a lot of quiet passages and a lot of loud passages. You can use the compressor to even out the dynamic range. What's here important to mention is you should always first try volume automation. For example, if you have a lead sound, which is when the lead sound starts to play, in the beginning is a little bit quiet and at the end it's more loud, then I would advise you to always first automate the volume, because it sounds always better instead of using a compressor. Because if you use a compressor, it will always change the sound of the signal. And if you just use volume automation, it sounds always more natural. Also, for example, if you have a lead sound or some single sounds which are popping out, I would advise you simply make some cuts and then apply the volume by hand. It's much more work, but it sounds much better. Then the next approach where we can use compressor is to glue things together. For example, on groups, if we use compression on a group, everything sits a little bit better in the mix. Everything sounds more out of one piece, and everything just sits a little bit better in the mix. For example, if you have some of the low mids which are sounding not so well in balance with the high mids, if you apply compression to it a little bit, everything will have a little bit better its space. And another thing where you can use compression is if you have a sound, especially on drums or in percussion, if you have some transients which are going crazy or popping out, I would use a compressor to tam the crazy transients a little bit. In this case, I would use the compressor more like a limiter, which means fast attack, fast release, high ratio, and always a gain reduction, not too crazy, maybe just around 1 and 7 dB, something like this.